Buenas tardes a todas y todos. Bienvenida a nuestra...
Welcome to our press conference at the end of our first seniors officials meeting. The rest of the press conference will be in English, since English is APEC's official language. We do have simultaneous interpretation, therefore you can make your questions in whichever language you feel most comfortable. Thank you very much again for being here.
The first senior officials meeting, SOM1 closing press conference. I would like to welcome and thank the journalists from national and international media outlets that are with us today. I am Luz Maria Correa from the APEC Peru 2024 Working Group. In today's press conference, we would like to share key takeaways and outcomes from the first senior officials meeting, SOM1. To do so, today, by our three spokespersons, Ambassador Carlos Vázquez, SOM Chair, Ministro Renato Reyes, SOM Peru, and Dr. Rebecca Santamaria, Executive Director of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Secretariat. Thank you very much for being here today at our press conference. Without further ado, I now give the floor to Ambassador Carlos Vázquez, SOM Chair.
Well, thank you very much for your presence in this press conference. We have had a very productive 2 weeks of very intense work with a lot of sub-fora and fora of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation of APEC. And I think that in real terms, the outcomes have not only met our expectations, but I think that have overcome our expectations, because we have received a very solid support from all the 20 member economies regarding 21, but of course 20, because yes, of the 20 member economies regarding our theme and our proposals that have already been assumed and accepted by the 20 member economies in December in the informal session of the senior officials meeting that took place in the Swiss Hotel. We have had more than 30 events, more than 25 sub-fora and fora, and when we are talking about sub-fora, we are talking about a lot of working groups and experts groups. And the fora are the committees that report to the senior officials meeting. The committees that comprise the structure of APEC, only for you to have an idea of the complex structure of this forum, are the committee on the economic committee, the committee on trade and investment, and the committee on economic and cooperation committee, technical and economic cooperation. So these three committees of a substantial, that deals with substantial matters report to the senior officials meeting. So for that reason, the senior officials meeting usually takes place in the end of this very long process of 2 weeks. So in these 2 weeks, more than 1,500 delegates have participated in this first segment of these meetings here in Lima. And in total, approximately, in accordance with information that we have received, 1,800 participants, including representatives of the Peruvian public sector, experts, people from the media, and organizational staff, have been present in this convention center. So this means that we have had a massive participation, not only of the delegates from the different member economies, but also representatives of different governmental agencies of our country, experts that have been invited to participate in policy dialogues that were very conducive to enrich the proposals that we have submitted to the consideration of the senior officials. So what are these proposals? These proposals respond to the priorities that we presented in the ISOM in December and were assumed by the 21 member economies. Our three priorities are trade and investment for an inclusive and interconnected growth, digitalization and innovation to promote a transition to formal and global economy, and third, sustainable growth for a resilient development. In every one of these priorities, we have presented particularly deliverables that in the APEC vocabulary. No? The deliverables are those objectives or outcomes that the APEC economies hope to attain at the end of this whole process. So regarding the first priority, that is trade and investment for an inclusive and interconnected growth, we propose the possibility of having a new vision of the so-called free trade area of the Asia-Pacific region. This is a very old aspiration of the forum. It was proposed in real terms by the private sector in 2004, 20 years ago, no, by the private sector represented in the APAC Business Advisory Council, ABAC, that is one of the pillars of this triangle structure of APEC, the private sector, governments, and the academia. And because of the changes that experience the international economic system in the last few years, we need to update that vision, taking into account some emerging issues that are of mutual interest of all the member economies of APEC. So these new issues are particularly sustainability, that has to do with environmental concerns, inclusion, particularly after the effects of the pandemics that hit very severely a lot of APEC member economies, and some geopolitical tensions that have emerged recently in the last 2 years. So we need to update, to adjust this vision, taking into account these new concerns of mutual interest of the 21 member economies. So this is the first deliverable that we hope to attain during this year, this new vision for the free trade area of the Asia-Pacific region. The second one has to do, if you allow me, there is another deliverable that is going very important, and it's associated with this first priority, is a declaration, a joint declaration of the ministers of trade and ministers responsible for women issues that is going to take place in Arequipa in the month of May about the economic empowerment of women. So for the first time, APEC is going to have a meeting of this nature, and this deliverable is going to be particularly important for all of us, because the intention of the deliverable is to propose some broad recommendations about ways and means to attain the objective of empower women, particularly those who led small and medium enterprises. So this is the two first deliverables regarding our first priority. Regarding our second priority, and in terms of the interest of the Peruvian economy particularly, is one of the most important ones, is a roadmap for the transition to formal and global economy. The Peruvian economy is one of the most affected by this phenomenon, in accordance with some findings by the Policy Support Unit, that is a sort of think tank of the APEC Secretariat. Approximately between 56 and 59% of the Peruvian GDP is explained by the informal sector. But this think tank of the APEC Secretariat discovered that there is a lot. Of course, they base their findings on some research already developed by some very important international organizations such as the World Bank, the OECD, and others, IMF too. And there is quite a few number of APEC economies who are affected by this phenomenon, like, well, some countries, economies in Southeast Asia, no, and even some other economies here in Latin America. Even the most developed economies of the forum, one way or another, they are affected by this phenomenon, in different proportions, of course. So, what is the deliverable that we hope to attain regarding this second priority? It's a roadmap that is going to contain policy recommendations, the best practices that could be applied by member economies regarding the particular realities of their economic structures regarding the informal sector. To attain that objective, we have proposed what we have called the key ET elements. That is the key elements table that is going to be one of the most important components of this roadmap. Some of these elements are going to include well, issues such as structural reform. It's a very complex issue. It's going to be, we are trying to propose a sort of multidimensional approach, for the economies to take into account a lot of the best combination of policies, to gradually overcome this problem or reduce the levels of informality in their respective economies. So this key ET, or the key elements table of this roadmap, are going to contain issues such as structural reforms, financial inclusion, access to education and health, and something that is extremely important, digitalization and innovation, some digital tools that could allow particularly small and medium enterprises that are the economic sector that is mostly affected or more affected by informality, for them to register in a more friendly manner, and to reduce the transaction costs. So this is, in general terms, one of the most important issues that are going to be contained in this KET and in this roadmap. This is regarding the second priority. Regarding the third priority, that is sustainable growth for a resilient development, we have proposed two deliverables. The first one is a policy guidance for the use of the hydrogen as a alternate energy, in the Asia-Pacific region, And we have presented a proposal that is going to be discussed by the pertinent working groups in the following months. And finally, a set of principles to prevent and reduce food loss and waste. These proposals have already been discussed. Of course, we are in a preliminary stage. This is the first senior officials meetings and associated meetings is the first one. So we are in a very preliminary stage, but we are relatively optimistic because we have received very good inputs from our partners in APEC. So in general terms, these are the pillars and the deliverables that I would like to inform all of you. And I think that we are in a very good path to finally, by the end of this year, I hope so, to be able to be supported by the member economies to finally approve all these deliverables. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Vázquez, for sharing your thoughts with us. Ahora cedo la palabra al ministro Renato Reyes.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Luz Maria. And since today is International Women's Day, I would like to greet all the women who are present in our auditorium. And I also wanted, in addition to what Ambassador Vasquez has just said, I wanted to say that APEC is a laboratory of good practices. And the work that we do here aims at serving as a reference for so that our economies can develop public policies that would address the challenges that they have to face. So the presence of Peru in APEC, well, Peru has developed a strategy called APEC for People, APEC for People. And within that framework, and during this past 2 weeks of high officials and collateral events that we have had in this center, we have invited small and micro companies so that they can offer their products to close to 1,500 people who have participated in these meetings. We had medium and small enterprises coming from Puno, from the Amazonian region, from Cusco, just to mention a couple of them. They have brought not only the products, but they have also exhibited the creativity that they have. And within that framework of APEC for People, we have already brought the high senior officials and the experts from different working groups, and we have taken them so that they may be able to interact with universities and entrepreneurial guilds, because APEC has to project what it does, and civil society has to be made aware of what is being done. So we are interacting with civil society, and this has proven to be quite fruitful. And in addition to this, I wanted to say that in the framework of these 2 weeks, 7 national sectors have chaired over working groups. SUNAT, the prosecutor's office, the Secretariat for Public Entities, INACAL, just to mention a few, and 3 of them have co-presided some working groups. This is quite relevant because APEC not only falls for one sector, it is a multi-sectoral, because we just address multi-sectoral issues. So in this sense, we believe it has been 2 very productive 2 weeks, because the initiatives and the documents that we aimed to have approved in the course of this year, and particularly with the presence of economic leaders who are going to be meeting here in November, heads of state, heads of government. So as you see, we have started the processes to prepare all these proposals. We have received, of course, feedback and recommendations from the other 20 economies that we will certainly incorporate in the proposal, in the matrix of the key areas that this transition to formal economy. There's been one expert from New Zealand who has said, in the course of one of the dialogues that we have held to learn more about this topic of informality, he said that Peru, while bringing this topic of informality, found just the missing gap, or closed the gap towards reaching social inclusion in APEC. When you look at the work that is being done, you'll see that it is not only to look at the tree, but look at the whole forest. So the work that we have been doing at the level of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, together with all the national sectors, and also with private sector and civil society, goes along that line. We have also invited the experts, for example, in topics of hydrogen. We have invited a businessman who will develop green hydrogen in Arequipa, for him to tell us about what he's doing, because here in an APEC, we also have to learn about the difficulties that these companies are encountering so that the government, can better understand the problems and come up with solutions. And the same thing with civil society. So, we've also had very constructive dialogue about what would the new vision of Asia Pacific be. 20 years ago, we launched this initiative, but we did not have digital economy 20 years ago. We did not have artificial intelligence. We did not even dream about there being a pandemic. So all these factors have actually changed the way in which we do business. Nowadays, with our cell phones, we can buy, we can pay digitally, and this has also opened an opportunity for small and medium companies and those who are in the formal sector move towards the digital community, which is a tool that we are sure could be useful cross-cut for inclusion purposes. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Minister Reyes, for your words. Ahora
Executive Director of APEC Secretariat, to share her comments.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody, and to the women in the room, happy International Women's Day. I just have a few points to add to what both Ambassador Vasquez and my friend Renato had to say. The work that Peru is doing this year continues the work that we started with the APEC Putrajaya Vision 2040, which goes beyond just trade and investment. That used to be the focus for APEC. A lot of work that we were doing had to do with trade and investment facilitation. But today, when you talk of trade and investment, you cannot ignore sustainability, you cannot ignore the challenge of climate change, and most of all, you cannot ignore the people. And so the work that Peru is doing this year is really, really important for us in APEC as we move to not just talk of trade and investment in terms of dollars and cents, but in terms of how our work affects the ordinary people. So that is a key part of a major, major contribution. And in the deliverables that Ambassador Vasquez just outlined, there is this running theme of how do all the things that we do impact people. So I think that is something that will be the legacy for Peru, because we have, as Renato just mentioned, the missing link that we talked about that was highlighted is the fact that in quite a number of our economies, we have the people in the informal sector, and the challenge is bringing them into the formal sector so that they can also benefit from global trade and the global economy. Now, the effort, this is the first time that APEC is actually putting this on the table for us to discuss. We may have intuitively thought about it, but we have not done it in a very structured and formal way. We have talked about inclusion in the context of indigenous peoples, in the context of women, in the context of micro, small, and medium enterprises, but we have not talked about it in the context of informality. So a lot of credit has to go to Peru for putting this on the table for us to have these very important discussions. And all of us, all 21 economies have agreed that this will be a deliverable this year. And I think that more than anything else, besides energy, the hydrogen and energy transition, I think this will be a legacy from the Peru year, which we will carry through in the coming years. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Santamaria, for your words. Continuing with today's program, we now open the floor to questions from the press. Before asking your questions, please state your name, the name of the outlet that you represent, and if possible, the name of the spokesperson to whom the question is addressed. Remember to keep your questions brief. Deseo recordarles que pueden formular sus preguntas en
Please, you can ask your questions in English or in Spanish.
Okay. While we start warming up with the questions, I have received a couple of questions.
That's one there.
This may be addressed to Dr. Santamaria. What are the main challenges that women entrepreneurs face in the APEC region?
Thank you very much for the question. At the Secretariat and at the Policy Support Unit, which Ambassador Vasquez has mentioned as our think tank, we have a mechanism to track how APEC economies are contributing to women's economic empowerment. We call this a dashboard of women and the economy. And in that dashboard, we highlight areas where we are doing well and areas where we need to do a lot more in terms of policy. And one of the areas that repeatedly comes up for our attention is access to capital and access to markets. So, we have to keep flagging this because somehow in the 21 member economies, there are economies that have difficult rules and regulations for women entrepreneurs, not so much for the men. It's interesting. But so we keep highlighting this because until those regulations are sorted out, women will still be disadvantaged and they will find difficulty to grow their business. The other area that we have also highlighted is what is important today as we celebrate International Women's Day is voice and representation. If you look at the 21 member economies, women at the highest level, whether it's as heads of government or heads of state, you can barely count the number of women there. I love this photograph that we had in 1993 when the leaders met for the first time. There was no woman leader in that group. And if you fast forward to this year, I think it's the same story. So that's one, representation. Even in parliament, there are not enough women represented in parliament. So if you don't have representation, then the voice, unless you have enlightened men like the ones we have here, the voice of the woman and the concerns and the needs will not be heard. So rules and regulations will be made as if we are a community of men. So the nuances that particularly impact women gets lost in that. So that's why among the various other areas that we have highlighted, these two stand out very, very strongly, and we need to address them. One is women's access to capital. The other is voice and representation, both in government and in the business, and in businesses, by the way. But on that score, I need to congratulate Peru because the head of the APEC Business Advisory Council is Julia Tarablanca, who's a woman. So good for you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Santamaria, for your answer. Any questions? Sí.
Hola, una pregunta para el señor Renato Reyes.
A question for Mr. Renato Reyes. It's within the framework of investment from the countries members of APEC, particularly China. China has invested in the country, in the port of Shanghai, which will probably be inaugurated in November with the presence of the Chinese president, while the Ministry of Foreign Trade has also announced a review of the free trade agreement, so the modernization of the same. What is your views in this respect? Well, this is what APEC is all about. The creation of APEC aims to reducing barriers to trade and to encourage the free movement of investments. And one of the instruments to generate this is connectivity and how we build connectivity. And connectivity allows us, for example, out of 35 days in connecting Peru with Asia, this period would reduce to 22 days. And if we go from the port of Shanghai all the way up to the north, all the Pacific basin, all the way to Asia, will take us 35 days, where before now we will cover the whole basin of the north of it. So this is what APEC is all about. Well, we people work in initiatives. This platform allows us to also develop bilateral mechanisms that help us to achieve economic growth. When I was young, I was head of the portfolio in the Department of China at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. In 2006, we did not have a free trade agreement with China, and the Sanitary Authority of China approved the entry of the red globe grape, that big grape that we have. So the first request that we received from China was 1,000 containers. Can you believe how much we could provide them with? The biggest companies were, well, and ideas like this are one of the ideas that came up with the creation of the Alliance of the Pacific that also has an impact as a result of APEC. If you look at the constitutional framework of the Alliance of the Pacific, it reads doing business with Asia Pacific. That is the core. So if you look at the figures of investments from the Asia-Pacific region with Peru, we have to 9,400 million of investment here. And as a result of this presidency, Indonesia will bring a big delegation of investment in November. And our Minister for the Production, she will also be leading the ministerial meeting for pymes, or for small and medium companies, and to underscore what has just been said, Peru not only has done this, what we negotiated in 2010 with China needs to be updated. Let's remember that back then there was hardly no digital economy. There was no artificial intelligence, digital energy. So it is necessary to just update the free trade agreement, and we certainly believe that this is of importance. But it not only stays there. Our delegations are currently working in the negotiations of a free trade agreement with Hong Kong, China, and it is very likely that this will be signed before the 21 APEC leaders that are going to be meeting here in November. And we also have started negotiations with Indonesia. This is what APEC is all about. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Reyes, for your comments. Another question?
Dr. Rebecca, what are the expectations the APEC Secretariat has for Peru during the 2024 presidency? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your question. The role of the APEC Secretariat is very specific. Our role is to support the host economy. Peru is considered, in our term, in our language, host economy. So our role at the Secretariat is to ensure that the priorities of Peru are managed and discussed in all our working groups. It is reflected in the agenda of all the different working groups and committees. So that's essentially the role, so that at the end of the year, we get to where we want to get. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Hello, Gianmarco Delgado from Agencia Andina. First of all, happy International Women's Day. For Dr. Rebecca, based on the dialogue held in these meetings, do you consider that it is possible to reach a concrete agreement for a free trade area between the APEC economies? Thank you.
Let me just, thank you for your question. It's important to go back to the basics, which is APEC is a voluntary, non-binding organization of 21 member economies. As such, we do not negotiate trade agreements. We facilitate the process. So what we do is we build capacity for our negotiators. We also assist, we have those conversations about what should go into trade agreements. So we facilitate those kinds of conversations, but we do not negotiate agreements. So what Peru is doing this year is to bring that conversation that we've been having for many years to a higher level, because now we already have, among the economies, they have their own trade agreements, whether it's the Comprehensive Partnership for the Trans-Pacific Partnership, that particular CPTPP agreement, whether it's the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership among ASEAN and some of its dialogue partners, whether it's a Pacific Alliance, these are already agreements that are in place. So how do we then bring all these and use them as a basis for us to deepen economic integration through what our aspiration is, ultimately the free trade area of the Asia-Pacific? When the idea of the free trade area of the Asia-Pacific was put in place in 2004, this was an initiative of the business community. There weren't that many trade agreements in the first place. And, and issues of human rights, labor rights, environment were not there. Today, when we are talking of potential trade agreements, deepening regional economic integration, issues of sustainability, of human rights, of labor rights, climate change have to be incorporated. So how do you do that? And that's the role of the conversations that we have in APEC today. So that's the aspiration is ultimately the free trade area of the Asia-Pacific, and then for us at APEC to help our economies, those officials, experts, move up in terms of knowledge and competencies so that they can begin to negotiate or get to our aspiration, our final aspiration of the free trade area of the Asia-Pacific. Long answer, sorry.
Thank you, Dr. Santamaria. Another question? Okay, I have one question. I've received one question. Es sobre si se puede...
Whether we can talk about the Peruvian priority in terms of sustainable growth. Sustainable growth is also a cross-cutting issue. We have two priorities we want to develop this year. To develop principles that will help us to prevent the loss and waste of food in the Asia-Pacific area. And for you to know what is the background to this, we have carried out a study or some research, and according to the FAO, 30% of the production of foodstuffs from the post-harvest stage all the way to the chain of supply until it reaches the final consumer is lost or wasted. 30%. If we reduce that 30% and to a reasonable percentage, this will have a triple impact. So we will stop wasting natural resources. Agriculture contributes to 17% to the issuance of greenhouse emissions. So there will also be a reduction of these greenhouse gases. And it also has an impact in terms of better nutrition to address the challenges posed by food safety and food security, and it also would have an impact on the economic growth of the economies. The other topic is related to generating resources such as hydrogen, like a source of low-emission fuel. Hydrogen will help us, for example, green hydrogen, which is a zero emissions when you produce energy. So it not only generates energy, but also generates organic fertilizers. And so this also has an impact on agriculture, but it also has, well, it has three characteristics altogether. It produces energy that can be stored and can be transported. And what does this mean? That it gives us a new economic vector, for example, in terms of exporting clean energy. So this is the work that we are doing. And a third issue would be the development of sustainable finances. And we are working this with the Ministry of Economy and Finance, together with its peers from the Asia-Pacific Group, how our authorities, when projecting the internal work, how they take into account the topic of sustainability. So these are the things that we are working this year, that we want to continue working this year from the presidency of APEC. Okay, is there any additional question? Oh,
We conclude the Q&A session. Thank you again, Ambassador Vasquez, Mr. Reyes, and Dr. Santamaria. Thank you all for your participation, and we hope to see you in Arequipa for SOM2 in May. Thank you very much.